It was October 14th when the Walker family, Mark 42, his wife Laura 39, and their son Evan 12, packed up their charcoal gray SUV and left their suburban home in Idaho Falls. The Black Ridge Mountains, a remote and densely forested range about 4 hours north, had long been one of Mark's favorite hiking destinations. As a former Army survivalist turned outdoor blogger, he knew the terrain better than most. Laura was a schoolteacher, cautious but supportive, and Evan, bright and curious, had been begging for a real mountain adventure ever since school started. It was meant to be a peaceful weekend retreat, completely offline and away from the noise of daily life. Before heading off, Mark texted his brother, "No signal up there. Back Monday, wish us luck." It was the last message anyone ever received from him. The family stopped briefly for supplies at a local gas station near the trailhead, snacks, 2 extra water canisters, and a roll of duct tape. Surveillance footage shows all three in good spirits. Evan, wearing a red beanie, was laughing and tugging at his dad's sleeve while Laura loaded the trunk. Nothing seemed off. No signs of tension. No suspicious strangers. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Their destination was Ash Creek Trail, a less traveled route known for its scenic cliffs, thick pines, and primitive campsites scattered miles apart. That morning, rangers had issued a weather warning. Light fog moving in, possibly overnight rain, but nothing serious enough to cancel experienced hikers. Locals, however, often spoke in hushed tones about those woods. Campers had reported strange noises in the past, heavy breathing near tents, odd footprints appearing overnight, even stories of mimicking voices calling from the trees. Most chalked it up to bears or wild imaginations. The walkers had no reason to be concerned. They began their ascent just after 11 a.m. Multiple hikers descending the trail that morning remembered seeing the family. One man recalled Evan waving enthusiastically as they passed, saying they were going to camp where the waterfalls start. That would place them near a remote ridge nicknamed Dead El Calo, a stretch of trail notorious for steep drops and poor GPS reception. From that point on, no one saw them again. They had seemingly vanished into the forest. That evening, the temperature dropped below freezing earlier than forecasted. Rangers later confirmed that the upper valley fog grew thick enough to hide the sun completely by 4 p.m., but the walkers were well equipped. Sleeping bags rated for sub-zero nights, insulated clothing, high-powered flashlights, and flare kits. They had even left an itinerary on their dashboard, something only seasoned hikers tend to do. Yet, despite all the precautions, despite their experience, not a single clue would emerge for the next 3 weeks. By Monday afternoon, when the walkers hadn't returned as planned, Laura's sister Melanie grew uneasy. At first, she assumed they had simply extended the trip by a day. It wouldn't have been out of character for Mark to make a spontaneous decision, especially if the scenery was beautiful. But when hours passed with no messages or calls, and Laura's phone still rang straight to voicemail, Melanie called Mark's brother. He hadn't heard anything either. The unease quickly turned to dread. Within an hour, both families filed a missing persons report. What was supposed to be a short weekend adventure now had a growing sense of something much worse. By Tuesday morning, a multi-agency search had already begun. The family's SUV was located first, still parked at the Ash Creek trailhead, untouched and locked. All 4 tires were clean, meaning the vehicle had never been moved since the moment it was parked. Inside were a half-finished coffee in the cup holder, Mark's spare flashlight, and a folded note that read, "See you on the other side, M." The phrase was odd, poetic even, and felt out of place. But authorities weren't sure if it was a clue, a joke, or just a personal saying. They photographed everything, bagged it, and kept searching. Search and rescue teams scoured the immediate trails for signs, footprints, camping debris, or broken branches that could indicate direction. They brought in canine units trained for both human scent and cadaver detection. At first, there was hope. One of the dogs picked up a faint trail heading east from the main path toward the waterfalls. But just a few miles in, the dog stopped suddenly, near a large boulder, and refused to move forward. The handler later described it as the most unnatural behavior I've ever seen from that dog. She just stared into the woods, tail down, ears flat, whining. It was noted in the report, but no cause was found. By the 4th day of searching, frustration began to set in. Authorities found no campfire ashes, no food wrappers, no broken twigs or gear left behind. It was as if the Walkers had walked into the forest and simply evaporated. The weather had remained mild since the weekend, no storms, no major rainfall, so terrain damage couldn't explain the lack of tracks. Aerial scans using thermal imaging turned up nothing. Volunteers covered over 30 square miles of dense wilderness, calling the families names and blasting loud whistles every 15 minutes. No responses ever came. More disturbing still was the complete silence from their electronic devices. Rangers tracked Laura's cell phone briefly, a final ping, registered late Saturday night, around 2:37 a.m., near a ridge overlooking Dead Elk Hollow. But then, nothing, no signal, no GPS bounce, not even static. Evan's smartwatch had stopped recording steps that same night. Authorities assumed the batteries had died or been turned off, but one ranger later mentioned something chilling in a closed debrief. Even if you smash a phone, it usually leaves a trace ping. These just went dark. Like something turned them off, all at once. On the 11th day of the search, just as authorities were preparing to scale back daily operations, a volunteer named Caleb Mercer, a retired firefighter who had joined the effort out of sheer compassion, made a chilling discovery. While exploring an overgrown area near Hollow Ridge Creek, nearly 9 miles off the designated trail, he noticed something wedged between two moss-covered rocks in a shallow stream. At first, he assumed it was debris, maybe a torn piece of a tent or discarded gear, but as he approached, the object's shape became unmistakable. A mud-soaked backpack, faded blue with a broken zipper. It was a child's size. Caleb's heart dropped. The search team had been operating under the assumption the family may have simply become lost, a dangerous, but survivable situation. But this felt different. He carefully removed the pack from the water, calling for backup as he did. The backpack was heavy, waterlogged, and partially torn along the side, as though it had been dragged. No animal tracks were nearby. Inside were several items: a half-eaten protein bar, a soggy hand-drawn map of the trail, 2 empty water pouches, and most disturbing of all, a photograph of the family, visibly warped by the water, but still recognizable. The photo was later dried and analyzed. It showed Mark, Laura, and Evan standing together in front of what looked like a large pine tree. It wasn't clear who had taken the photo. There were no matching images on Laura's phone backups. Stranger still were the deep gouge marks across Mark's face in the image, as if someone had tried to scratch him out violently with a knife or sharp stick. Investigators initially assumed the damage had occurred after the photo got wet, but lab analysis suggested the marks had been intentionally made before the photo entered the stream. It raised unsettling questions. Who had the backpack last? And why deface the image like that? The backpack itself was confirmed to be Evan's. His school initials were faintly visible under the flap. Yet the contents didn't all make sense. Rangers noted that Evan had left the trailhead wearing a red beanie and a blue rain jacket. Neither item was inside the pack or found nearby. Even more confusing, one of the items found in the pack, a small flashlight, had no fingerprints on it at all. Not even Evan's. It was completely clean. To clean, like it had either been wiped or never used. This discovery shifted the tone of the entire investigation. What had begun as a hopeful rescue mission now started to resemble something far darker, something calculated. Officials began to suspect that someone or something had taken deliberate steps to remove evidence. But if that were true, why leave the backpack at all? Was it carelessness? Or a message? Caleb, the volunteer who found it, was deeply disturbed. In a later interview, he admitted, it felt like it wanted to be found. Like someone put it there on purpose, just far enough to make sure we'd find it. Eventually, 2 days after the discovery of Evan's backpack, investigators began re-examining every piece of overlooked data from satellite scans to ranger radio logs. That's when a park surveillance technician named Darren Quill came across something strange hidden deep in the emergency response system's backlog. A short, untagged audio transmission picked up by a repeater tower near Dead Elk Hollow. The timestamp read 2:39 a.m., just 2 minutes after Laura's phone had emitted its final location ping, 11 nights earlier. The source of the signal was unclear, and the log hadn't flagged it as important at the time, likely due to its weak and static-filled quality. The clip was only 13 seconds long, but it sent chills through everyone who heard it. The audio began with dead static, followed by a faint rustling sound, as if something were moving quickly through dry leaves. Then came a whisper, fragile, broken, and nearly drowned by the noise. Slowing the audio down revealed the message more clearly. It watches at night. It copies us. Please help. There was a pause. Then, what sounded like a sharp exhale. And nothing. The signal cut off mid-transmission, as if it had been forcibly stopped. The voice was quiet, high-pitched, possibly Evan's, but possibly not. The recording was immediately sent to audio analysts. They filtered and enhanced it, hoping to find background clues, wind direction, animal sounds, anything. What they uncovered instead was even more disturbing. Beneath the voice, layered faintly in the static, was a second voice, mimicking the first, just milliseconds behind. Like an echo, but not quite. It didn't match any known environmental distortion pattern. Some experts described it as dual-source interference, where two speakers say the same thing simultaneously, but slightly out of sync. The second voice was lower, raspier, and unnatural. When Mark's brother was played the recording, he visibly tensed. He insisted that the first voice could definitely be Evan's, or someone trying to sound like him. But he also added something strange. The phrasing didn't sound like Evan, he said. Evan never used the word copy. He would have said mimic. He was obsessed with science stuff. That word choice feels off. Investigators made note of the comment, but there was no way to confirm its significance. Still, the idea that the message may have come from someone, or something, impersonating Evan, left everyone in the room shaken. The ranger station labeled the clip, "Unverified Transmission for 7B," and stored it under a restricted tag. Official reports simply refer to it as unresolved anomaly. But internally, the mood shifted. Teams began reporting odd equipment failures, walkie-talkies that crackled with static near certain ridgelines, trail cams going offline without cause, and even voices heard faintly over open radio channels, whispering names of the searchers. One team lead asked to be reassigned after claiming he heard his own voice on a channel no one was transmitting on. Whatever the origin of the audio recording, it had introduced a terrifying new question. What else was out there with them? And did it know how to speak? Exactly 3 weeks after the walkers vanished, a state wildlife biologist named Rhonda Bell was retrieving footage from motion-activated cameras placed across the Black Ridge region to monitor cougar activity. Most of the cameras were in high-altitude areas, far from the main trails, set to capture images at night when wildlife was most active. One camera, located along a narrow deer trail 15 miles east of Dead Elk Hollow, had triggered multiple times in the early morning hours of November 4th. Rhonda didn't expect much, maybe a bear or a raccoon scavenging, but as she clicked through the low-resolution, black-and-white images, she froze at precisely 3:14 a.m. The camera had snapped an image that was unlike anything she'd ever seen. The frame showed a small figure crouched low in the foreground, directly facing the lens. The proportions suggested a child, likely around Evan's age, barefoot and in what looked like torn clothing. His head was slightly tilted, eyes unnaturally wide, and his mouth open, as if mid-sentence. Behind him, partially obscured by the tree line, was something else. A tall, pale shape with distorted limbs and glowing eyes stood motionless, just far enough in the shadows to make out its outline, but not its full form. Rhonda zoomed in, thinking it must be some kind of light flare, but the shape remained solid, tangible. She reported the image immediately. Within hours, park rangers and state investigators had sealed off the area surrounding the camera. Prints. No clothing fragments, no recent animal activity, not even disturbed leaves. The ground was strangely undisturbed for such a remote trail. A few of the searchers privately noted the tree line looked different, older, somehow, as if the trees had aged unnaturally fast. More unsettling was the condition of the camera itself. It had been ripped off its tree mount, found 12 feet away in a shallow ditch, cracked across the lens. It had recorded nothing after 3:14 a.m. The memory card was intact, but the battery had been crushed from the inside out. Back at the ranger station, image analysts attempted to enhance the footage. Digital sharpening clarified some disturbing details. The child figure's face was not entirely right. The eyes appeared too large, the pupils blown out far wider than natural in the lighting. The arms seemed too thin. And around the mouth were the faintest smudges of black, as if the lips had been stained with soil or ink. Most jarring of all was the timestamp metadata. Though the photo was taken at 3:14 a.m., internal camera logs suggested it had activated multiple times between 3 o'clock and 3:13 a.m., yet none of those images existed. They had been erased, not corrupted, deleted with deliberate overwrite, something no wildlife could do. Rhonda was asked not to speak to the press. Officially, the camera had malfunctioned. But word leaked through volunteers. And soon, rumors spread of a mimic in the woods, something that could walk like a child, speak like a lost hiker, and stare into cameras as if it knew what they were. The blurry, sharpened image circulated privately among ranger teams. Some refused to look at it a second time. One ranger described it in a whispered voice, "It's not the kid that scares me. It's what's behind him. That thing wasn't watching him, it was waiting for him to finish." The morning after the wildlife camera footage was recovered, a specialized ground team was dispatched to the exact GPS coordinates of the image, deep within a forgotten stretch of the Black Ridge backcountry known as Old Pines Gap. It was remote, densely wooded, and notoriously quiet. Even bird calls were rare in that part of the forest. The team included trackers, biologists, and forensic investigators, all tasked with uncovering any physical evidence. Almost immediately, they found something unusual: a set of barefoot footprints in the frost-covered soil, small enough to belong to a child, leading from the base of a tree directly toward the spot where the camera had been mounted. The prints were incredibly detailed. Investigators could count individual toes and even faint lines on the soles, as if the feet had been wet or oily when they made contact with the ground. They were fresh, undisturbed, and oddly warm to the touch, despite the freezing temperature. But what disturbed the team most was their direction. The footprints led inward toward the camera for about 30 feet, then stopped. No return prints. No sign the person had walked away, run, or even been carried. The tracks didn't fade. They didn't get lighter. They simply ended, as if the child had stepped into the ground itself or vanished into thin air. Searchers widened their sweep in all directions, thinking maybe the trail had been disrupted by wind or obscured by leaves, but nothing turned up. Dogs brought to the scene picked up a faint scent trail leading to the last footprint, and then began circling in confusion, refusing to move beyond the final impression in the dirt. One of the handlers noted that the dogs became visibly distressed, growling softly, ears back, tails between their legs, behavior typically reserved for encountering apex predators. But no animals were near. No sounds, just the wind rattling the dead branches above. The team examined the surrounding trees for signs of climbing or struggle, broken limbs, bark scratches, snapped twigs, but found none. What they did find, however, was perhaps more unsettling. About 12 feet up one of the trees, a child's red beanie caught on a jagged branch. It fluttered slightly in the breeze, as if newly placed. It matched the one Evan had been wearing when the family first entered the trail system. There were no scratch marks on the trunk beneath it, no footprints near the base, and no blood. Somehow, it had gotten up there. With no trace of how, one ranger, disturbed by the discovery, quietly suggested something that was quickly dismissed by the others, that the beanie hadn't been dropped or thrown, but placed deliberately, like a marker, as if someone or something wanted the team to find it. Others weren't so quick to dismiss the idea. As the team prepared to pack up, one searcher glanced back toward the footprint site and whispered something under his breath. There were only 2 sets of prints, one going in, and one standing still. His words left a silence heavier than the cold air. That night, half the team refused to return to that location. The rest wouldn't talk about what they saw after sundown. 2 days after the vanishing, footprints were discovered. A separate report came in from a pair of hunters passing through a remote section of the eastern Black Ridge Range. They'd taken shelter during a sudden temperature drop inside an old, unmapped wooden hunting cabin roughly 10 miles from the last known location of the Walker family. The structure was weathered, half-collapsed in one corner, and clearly abandoned. For years, inside, they found broken furniture, mildew, and signs of animals having nested there at some point. But one detail made them freeze. The door had been recently forced open, and in the center of the room stood a kitchen chair facing the wall, unnaturally positioned, as if someone had been sitting and staring at the bare boards. More unsettling was what they found nailed to the wall directly in front of the chair. A crumpled, yellowed piece of paper, pierced with an old hunting knife, fluttered slightly in the breeze blowing through a cracked window. The note had clearly been written in a rush. The handwriting was frantic, uneven, and shaky. The words read, "We're not alone. It wears our faces. Don't come looking." The hunters left immediately, radioed the discovery to authorities, and waited at a nearby ridge until rangers arrived to secure the scene. When investigators arrived, they confirmed the note had been written in fresh ink. Lab analysis suggested it was no older than 48 hours, placing its creation well after the Walkers had gone missing. But what disturbed the forensics team most was the handwriting. A sample comparison with previous documents confirmed the signature matched Mark Walker's penmanship, nearly identical in slant, spacing, and pressure patterns. The only discrepancy, the downward strokes of certain letters, the W in we're, the D in don't, were shaky and uneven, as if the writer's hand had been trembling violently, or wasn't entirely human. Investigators also noted something eerie about the knife used to pin the message. It wasn't rusted, and it didn't belong to the cabin. In fact, it matched a blade from a camping set owned by the Walker family. Part of the gear Mark had purchased just days before their trip. It was supposed to be in the missing inventory from their packs. The blade was wiped clean, no fingerprints, no blood, no residue, and there were scratches on the chair legs, deep and repetitive, as if someone had been gripping it tightly or resisting being pulled from it. No footprints led into the cabin. No tracks led out. Just a faint, persistent humming sound that several searchers claimed to hear when they entered the room, though no recording device captured it. The forest around the cabin was dense and silent. Rangers did a 100-yard sweep in every direction but found nothing. No wildlife. No gear. Just an overwhelming sense of being watched. One searcher later reported seeing something move just beyond the tree line. Not an animal, not a person, but a shadow in the wrong shape, too tall and too still. When asked to describe it, he refused. The note, the blade, the chair, and the positioning of everything in the cabin seemed intentional. Not an act of desperation, but a warning, or worse, a trap. But who or what wanted it to be found? To this day, the Walker family has never been found. No remains, no confirmed sightings, no more signals, recordings, or clues. The cabin has since been sealed off, the trail leading to it erased from official park maps. Those who worked the case were quietly reassigned. Some refused to speak of what they saw. Others simply stopped showing up altogether. The investigation is technically still open, but no one is actively searching. What really happened in the Black Ridge Mountains during those 24 days? Was it a tragic accident, a family lost to the unforgiving wild, or did they stumble into something ancient? Something that knows how to watch, and wait, and wear your face. One thing is certain, the forest still remembers. And if you listen closely at night, just before the wind dies, you might hear a whisper through the trees. It copies us. Please help.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.